welcome to our webinar, 5 Reasons Orchestration is a Better Fit than ERP. My name is Marcela Alves and I'll be the moderator for today. Today we have 2 special guests with us. Christopher Carrick, CEO at Clockworx, who's going to be leading our conversation. And together with us as well is William Cass, director at Pegasus. Before we start the talk, this webinar is going to be recorded. So please, if you have some issues with that, leave me a comment on the chat. Furthermore, if you have any questions you'd like to share with us, please let me know in the comments, or you're also welcome to speak up and I'll find the best time for you to do so. With no furthermore notes, I would like to pass the word to William. William, hello and welcome.
Hi there, Marcela. Thank you so much for the introduction. Really appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are as you join us today. My name's William Cass. I'm a director at Pegasus, and I have with me today Christopher Carrick, CEO at Clockworx. Good afternoon or good morning, Chris, to you.
Good morning. As it happens, I'm calling in from Brazil today, so my time zone a little bit different than yours.
A small part of me feels jealous. A larger part of me feels you had to get up earlier than me. So appreciate you joining today. I guess we'll go into the subject of today's call, but perhaps you could very briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name is Christopher Carrick. I'm the CEO of Clockworx. Largely, I'm responsible for the design and development of the system. My background is in software design engineering and executive management. I've been doing this sort of thing for coming out 35 odd years and have worked on all manner of systems. So over the last 10 or 15, worked with a variety of manufacturing companies as CTO or COO, and helped transition them into a more automated way of doing things.
Perfect, thank you. And I think it's quite timely to have this conversation today. And the subject of the webinar is 5 reasons orchestration is a better fit than ERP. But if we take a step back from that and we look at the landscape that a lot of organizations are trying to operate in right now, clearly COVID has had its impacts. There are a lot of folks struggling with supply chain issues at the moment. There's labor shortages in other parts of the industry. There's cash flow challenges for different types of organizations. So folk are trying to make pretty serious decisions. Any sort of ERP, but any software investment's a big decision and a big investment for organizations. And so particularly given the number of challenges that organizations are facing at the moment, I think getting some clarity around what alternatives and solutions are out there, I think is very, very important. So we really appreciate your time today, Chris. And I have to say, I am looking forward to hearing what you have to say. With that in mind, and I'll apologize, I am a little bit of a layman. Is orchestration the same as ERP?
Orchestration seeks to look at issues that may exist within the holistic process, an end-to-end sales process. ERPs traditionally focus on just the manufacturing process and all of the things that need to be done within manufacturing. It's not uncommon for people to be using something like Salesforce to manage the sales process because it does a great job at managing sales. You don't try to get ERP to manage your sales process. There are likewise other parts of the process that are better managed by specific bespoke applications. So orchestration is more about taking all of those bits and pulling them together. Now, it is possible for an orchestration system to do some of what an ERP system does. And in a case where manufacturing doesn't require a large and complicated ERP system, it's entirely possible that an orchestration system could work in its place to deal with some of the simpler processes that need to take place to actually fulfill an order, to produce something and get it out the door. So orchestration is more about keeping track of everything that's going on and moving data from system to system in an automated and efficient way to help keep things moving. Now, our origins are very much in project management, scheduling, workflow, analytics. And so we know a lot about what it takes to actually get things done. And in recent years, to create an orchestration system, we've included features like knowledge management, information consolidation, workflow management, automation, exception management, order processing, etc. So it's not really all about just the manufacturing process. Ultimately, the job is to collect the money for the goods that have been produced and manufactured. So while ERP systems, again, focus on the building of the products, everybody needs to worry about the whole process. You need to get things from sales to manufacturing. Maybe there's a requirements capture exercise that takes place in the middle of that. Then from manufacturing, they might need to go to a quality assurance program. From quality assurance, it might need to go to warehousing or logistics. And logistics is a whole area on its own these days. Massive number of things that need to be done to ensure that goods can actually reach their destination quickly and efficiently. Then after, of course, the goods have been delivered and the customers have accepted them, there might be an installation process that needs to be managed. From there's a post-sales process. There might be servicing that needs to be accomplished. And then there's information that needs to be collected from the field on how well that product is doing. And that then might feed into a sales process again, where new parts can be ordered, where servicing can be ordered. So it's far more expensive than just dealing with the manufacturing. It's dealing with the entire product life cycle, everything from figuring out who wants to buy this thing to figuring out what additional services they might require after they've actually acquired it. So consequently, an orchestration system can help deal with campaigns where there might be multiple applications that need to be brought into play for campaign management, customer outreach, opportunity management, order entry, or configuration of an order, contact management, defining requirements and specifications, moving deals from sales to manufacturing, especially where a dedicated sales management tool might be used, moving from manufacturing to quality assurance, as I noted, move from QA to warehousing or logistics to invoicing, and then, of course, all the post-sales activities. Now, all of this needs to be done as seamlessly as possible. Automating the flow of information from system to system isn't easy, and often it's done in a manual, error-prone way. Keeping everyone up to date as the processes continue all the way through the various steps can likewise be a challenge. And of course, as things go wrong, adjusting estimated delivery times because something, let's say, has happened within logistics or something has happened within the specification, or maybe something has happened within the supply chain. This can also be a challenge. So something needs to be aware of what's going on across all of these activities so that it can adjust the timescales and provide a high-level view of when things can actually be delivered. Likewise, there's a need to assess and manage risks through a delivery, especially where the delivery is something highly bespoke and complex. Escalations can also be a challenge where things aren't being done to predicted timescales, where you expect something to be done within a particular time frame. Again, ERP systems may be not so good at dealing with some of the project management challenges. So very often you need to make sure that you have an automated way to make people aware that something that needed to be done hasn't been done. Also, you need a high-level audit log. You need to make sure that you understand what things or what needs to be done or what has been done and what decisions have been made along the way. And that can be a real challenge today with the proliferation of chat systems. People are moving off of email and onto chat systems. But even with email, you have a completely separate system that's keeping track of decisions that are made as part of the order flow. Ideally, you need something that can bring all of that information in so that you ultimately have everything that you need to either make a decision or track down what's gone wrong in one place. So really, ERP is part of what you need to get things done, but not the whole part. And rather than looking at extending ERP systems forever, companies are better off looking at best of breed solutions for handling the different parts of the process within the organization. You wouldn't expect ERP, for example, to handle chat. You would use a chat system to do that. So you need to bring that information into the overall flow. Does that make sense?
It does. And it actually, as you were talking, it reminded me of a fairly well publicized issue that LeasePlan had. LeasePlan had a successful SAP deployment in its Australian subsidiary back in 2016. It's a vehicle management company. They, in 2018 or 2019, they abandoned their ERP implementation, writing off, hold on to your hats, 92 million euros or $100 million in project costs and millions more in related restructuring consultancy fees. The problem for LeasePlan, at least as they stated in their second quarter results that year, was that they found their implementation not fit for purpose in the emerging digital world in which it operated. That the monolithic nature of their SAP system hindered its ability to make incremental product and service improvements at a time of accelerated technological change. So what they did was keep ERP to its core functionality, and instead the company built a modular system using best of breed third-party components alongside its existing predictive maintenance, insurance claim, and contract management systems. And so I suppose integrating that capability and then extending it with additional functionality, which would be the case with orchestration, they felt they could have a more scalable and incremental product deployment experience for their customers and for their internal and their external customers. So I think it's yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, indeed, they probably found that there were systems out there that did a better job than SAP at particular parts of the process. So it's good to bring them all together and use them where appropriate.
That said, it can be quite challenging to bring everything together, as you say. So how do you accomplish that with orchestration?
You're right. There are a lot of moving parts in doing this, in doing an implementation. Now, first and foremost, modern applications support APIs. Everything that's been produced in the last 4 or 5 years has some kind of API, and the APIs are more or less capable of providing information from that application and feeding information back into it. But the APIs alone are not enough. I think key to integrating with other systems is to understand how those systems have been configured, because of course each system that's used is configured in a completely bespoke way that's specific to the customer. And so even when using APIs, we generally conduct a detailed analysis of the configuration of each application to find out exactly what kind of information is there and how that might fit into the overall workflow. Now, when it comes to applications that don't have an API, it's much, much more challenging to push and pull information. But we incorporate a couple of really good tools for data synchronization, one called Symmetric DS, the other called Talon-D, that allows us to replicate tables from existing systems. So information can be mirrored from the external system into the orchestration system. And this allows us to pick that apart and then collect the data that we need to incorporate into the higher level processes to tell us when things need to be done. We try to avoid, wherever possible, feeding information back into a raw database that can be quite dangerous for the target application. But sometimes we're able to move, let's say, contact data back into the target system so that we are able to make sure that all of the systems with the organization have the same view of what's going on in terms of contacts. Also, we have mechanisms that allow us to move files back and forth between systems, and this very much helps us keep information into context. And so where you have a workflow that is moving from point to point, from end to end within the system, you want access to information that's going to help you make a decision that needs to be made or help you do something that you need to do. And so there we reach out, we grab files from document management systems, for example, and we incorporate them or provide links to them within the tasks that need to be accomplished. And that then puts that information at the disposal of people who need to make the decisions or take action. Finally, application automation, where we absolutely have to deal with an application. And this kind of approach works better for legacy applications where there are no APIs, and there is something that we need to feed into it. We can automate the application itself. We can use tools that sit above a web-based application or a PC or Mac or Linux-based application, a desktop application, and can drive the injection of data into that system as if it were a user. So we can take a variety of ways to actually integrate with these applications. And this provides a way to, again, get information from and then push information back. Does that answer your question?
Makes perfect sense. So protect your existing investments through that integration and then extend it with the orchestration, the capability within the orchestrator. Understood. Taking us back, do you see any other ways that high-level orchestration can succeed where ERP systems fail?
Now, when you have a high-level process, and even when you're moving from application to application, there are often little things that you need to do. So, for example, we're talking about the sales process and moving that into production or manufacturing. Between something like Salesforce and the ERP system, there might be a number of smaller steps that need to take place. There might need to be a number of approval processes that need to occur. There might be some information gathering tasks that need to occur. There might be some requirements capture. And that's generally not handled by the sales system and not handled by the ERP system. And so something needs to interject and then provide additional queues or additional workflows that allow the people who need to do that work to do that work. And then all of that, of course, needs to be brought into the high-level process that's being managed. Additionally, ERP systems don't generally provide a generalized knowledge management capability. So important when you're managing a process flow from end to end, that you have a lot of help for people. People need to understand what needs to happen each step along the way. They need to be able to look up information that might be stored within the company. And again, that needs to be brought into the process. Now, there may already be an intranet, for example, that contains some of this information. And in cases like that, we can link to the intranet. But where something doesn't exist, a good orchestration system is going to provide forums for dealing with questions where people can discuss particular issues. Knowledge bases where people can contribute to a core set of knowledge within the company on how to do things. And so there might be processes that people find work, and they can share that with their colleagues and then contribute to the overall process and then link that back into the work that needs to be done. Likewise, again, when you're going from end to end with a process like this, you need to analyze what's going on each step of the way. You need to try to figure out how long it's taking to do things and whether things are being done within expected timeframes. Where they're not, you need to make people aware. And so an analytics capability is very important. And because that analytics capability needs to actually integrate and interact with the workflow, it's not enough to simply have a control tower application that's able to provide some pretty charts and graphs. You need to actually allow people to get to the underlying data and assess the underlying problem. Orchestration tools are very good at doing this sort of thing. Likewise, there's a need to project manage a lot of this stuff. There's a need to maintain a detailed record and to maintain Gantt charts, have Scrum boards, Kanban boards that help support this. And not all ERP systems provide that kind of capability. So orchestration, or our orchestration system, has all of that capabilities, tremendous project management capabilities for managing the tasks that need to be done.
Makes sense. It does indeed. It certainly does. And it opens up a number of other questions, I suppose. And what, I guess, perhaps more loosely, what other challenges do businesses and people face when they implement new software in general, but of course, specifically around ERP?
Well, change is always difficult. I think if you were to ask anybody within an organization whether they think change is required, everybody will agree that they want change. They want change to occur. On the other hand, if you ask individuals, are they willing to change what they do and how they do it to accommodate these improvements for the business? Nobody wants to change. People get used to doing things in a particular way. They want to keep doing things this way. And so many large-scale systems like ERP rollouts fail because organizations ultimately have no idea what works and what doesn't work. And so they try to implement a system that is all things to all people, but does nothing particularly well. So orchestration in that context can be used to help collect data from the existing systems to figure out what is actually working, what is behaving the way it should, what is getting done quickly and efficiently. And even if or when an ERP system is deemed to be necessary, if you first have a system that integrates with the bits and pieces you have within the organization, then it's easy to integrate the ERP system into all of that so that it then contributes to that body of knowledge and information. And any KPIs that are developed to actually assess the sales order process, for example, can then be used to ensure that the improvements made within, let's say, an ERP system are actually being delivered or providing the benefit that you expect. And post-rollout, these analytics can be used to help tune and improve the system. Sometimes there's not enough time to put into studying the existing processes. And so people launch into a system hoping that the new system will kind of gloss over things that haven't been thought about or provide a workable way to deal with all of the issues. But of course, no two organizations are the same, and no system is really good at dealing with all things for all people, as noted above. ERP system or large-scale systems can often take a very long time to plan and execute. So often companies find that the way they do things will change as the rollout is taking place. So when the rollout is finished, you find that the processes that existed before no longer exist or have dramatically changed. So a system needs to be dynamic enough to be able to change as the processes change. But of course, this then creates a challenge when actually trying to deliver a solution, because of course the goalposts keep shifting. And so the time it takes to actually deliver the solution takes longer and longer and longer. So much better to take a stepwise approach to making these changes, pick one or two problems and then solve those problems. Again, potentially leaving the best of breed solutions in place, the systems that are already probably doing a pretty good job at solving certain parts of the problem, and then look at targeting specific issues one at a time, rather than trying to change anything. And then, of course, whatever you do in this case, it needs to have data management in place and workflow in place that allows you to shift and change the workflow or the information within the workflow to suit what's being done. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and you've given me the opportunity to kind of geek out on some historical examples of where this stuff perhaps hasn't worked. And one of the things that came to mind was Woolworths, or as we like to call them in the UK, Woolies, no longer with us, not because of their implementation failures, but changes to high street footfall. But Woolies implemented an SAP solution to replace their in-house built system that they'd run for some 30 years. It was a program and a project fraught with various challenges. And I suppose one of the biggest crises that arose for them was that the profit and loss reports that were tailored for individual stores and which managers were accustomed to receiving every week couldn't be generated for nearly 18 months. So you think about that, right? An organization with several hundred stores flying blind in terms of store performance for 18 months. The problem lay in the change in data collection procedures, but the root cause was a failure of the business to understand its own processes, to your point. The day-to-day business procedures weren't properly documented. And of course, the senior staff left the company over, I think it was a 6 or 7 year project in terms of how business has changed, particularly now over that period of time. A lot of that institutional knowledge was lost. And so consequently wasn't baked into their rollout. And then it's led to a series of pretty significant and pretty expensive problems for that particular organization. I suppose for them, they didn't know how they were getting it right, or if they were getting it right with that, flying blind for those 18 months. But if I can turn that question around to think about organizations and deployments, how do you know you are getting it right when you are working through a large scale project?
Well, ultimately,
if you can,
getting it right. Ultimately, you're getting it right when you see improvements across the entire process, and this is why the collection of KPIs are important, or at least the establishment and collection and monitoring of KPIs are important across all of the parts of the process. And again, I think it's important to restate that ultimately no system does everything well. Large-scale systems are jacks of all trade, but master of none. I've had many implementations where people use one or more parts of SAP rather than the whole thing because it does a particularly good job at one particular thing, but then doesn't do everything. Now, again, a challenge to getting things right and showing these improvements, as I indicated before, is that the ground is constantly shifting. I mean, supply chain is a problem for everyone these days. There are the transport issues or supply issues where now that we're out of COVID or coming out of COVID, everybody needs everything yesterday, and that just can't happen. And so there are going to be natural disruptions. And so going back to what I said before, it's important to have something that adapts quickly to the changing landscape and can provide additional information where required. And so again, you're getting it right when the task and project management systems are telling you things are being delivered on time, when the project status displays or the delivery status displays that you have are showing that everything is going well. You're getting it right when ultimately the customers are happy. Now, again, back to the point about the shifting landscape. I think this also relates to what we were saying before about the capabilities of more generalized systems. So you may find that, let's say due to Brexit, for example, more documentation is required when shipping goods or even receiving goods. You may find that people aren't being notified when things are late. For example, I think key to making a large-scale system, or at least an overarching system work, is to reach into as many external systems as possible and then suck in the data from those systems to tell you what's going on. And then from there, trigger actions that help you deal with problems before they become serious. And that even includes things such as escalations. Not all companies are great at getting things done when they should be done. When problems occur, that takes people away from other activities that need to take place. And so you really need a mechanism that allows you to tell when things have gone off the rails and make the appropriate people aware that things need to be looked at. I think you also know that you're getting it right when you're able to accurately predict the supply of goods across the system. So when you're able to take the sales information or pre-sales information that you have in your sales projections, and then use that to estimate what supplies that you're going to need to actually manufacture or produce or warehouse the goods that you need to sell to the customers. You need to have some kind of predictive analysis that says, okay, based on this or this number of sales in this particular area, we're going to need these number of supplies, and then try to deal with that early rather than late to accommodate the delays that we all know are going to happen these days.
We are indeed working on a project similar to that, and I have to be somewhat guarded as to names and locations, as it isn't public information, but manufacturing company of around $65 to $70 million a year. And one of their major challenges is exactly that. Their order entry doesn't link up to their inventory management systems. And so what they have are client-facing teams making commitments that cannot be fulfilled. There are, in fact, a couple of cases where they have sold the same stock 3 times, twice and thrice, in fact, and that presents a significant amount of challenges, both in terms of client satisfaction, but with the sort of supply chain friction that we're seeing at the moment, it's even harder than it would have been in the past to kind of make up for that kind of oversight. The subsequent activity, the sort of approach they have had to take in the past is to start having more stock than they require, which of course is dead money, and we're all kind of aware of the challenges there. So I guess that's a pretty good example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of where information needs to come from a variety of sources to actually make decisions about how to run the business. Whether you spend more money to provide a safeguard, or whether you economize and hope that things will go well as the process continues. And again, no single system can do all of these things really well. Right? You have your inventory management system for telling you what's actually in the warehouse. You have your order processing system, your account system, and then you have your sales system. And they all are silos of information, and that information needs to be brought together in a sensible way to allow you to make decisions about what actually needs to be done. And here, orchestrators can quickly adapt to these changes and these challenges. If necessary, new workflows can be created, new analytics can be added to show you what's going on within the business. But also going back to what I was saying before, it's really important to have a single source of knowledge, or good knowledge management capability within the system. Something that's able to take the way you do things and incorporate what's actually going on. So you have ever-shifting dynamic guides and information panels that will actually give people a summary of what's going on, perhaps give them an indication of what needs to be done, and then bring real data into play. So all of these things help. You there? Does that answer your question?
Hi, I am there. I'm so sorry, I muted myself. It was my golden opportunity. I sounded very wise to myself there. My question was, I suppose, what other lessons can we learn? I mean, what other sort of salient points do you think there are when sort of trying to map out, ERP or orchestration?
Well, I think key is to, as you noted in some of your examples, avoid very, very large scale, long rollouts. So integrating any system, including ERP, into a brand new startup is a big task, to try to understand how things need to be done and understand what the products are all about. Molding an ERP into or a large-scale system into a well-established business is massively complex and fraught with difficulty, political difficulties, procedural difficulties. It becomes close to impossible. So I think much more important to take a more economical, stepwise approach. Find ways to leverage what you have, prove that new processes work, find ways to take the rigidity out of what you're doing. And again, existing systems within an organization are there because they do a good job at solving a problem. And they do the job well, I think also because people know the idiosyncrasies of the software. They know what it does well, they know what it does badly, and then they focus on what it does well. And so really, I think you need to try to minimize wherever possible the risks. Utilize whatever works within the organization, bind things together where appropriate, and automate carefully. Right? a large and disruptive rollout really suits no one. It ultimately costs money and destroys productivity rather than producing real benefits.
Understand. Salami tactics. Yeah, it does. It's salami tactics, right? Slice by slice. And it reminds me of the Washington State Community College example, which kind of made its way to the press because of the $13 million HTC sued Washington College Community College for. The main issue for the Washington State Community College rollout at the time, I think it was a PeopleSoft ERP rollout, was largely internal. Some pretty significant delays internally. Rather than taking that slice by slice approach, they have 34 campuses, all of which had completely varying and different business processes that they needed to standardize, none of which was apparent until they started the rollout, or at least well into the rollout. So they ended up in a rather difficult situation where they decided to roll out across all 34 locations at once. And while they were doing that, they found they had hugely disparate working practices that would have been perhaps uncovered had they taken a slightly different approach. And as I say, the reason that came to light in the industry press was really because of the litigious problems that occurred after the fact. Does that make sense, Chris? Does that speak to your point?
Yeah, for sure. Back to what I was saying. I'm a real fan of.
Sorry, before you start, we're 5 minutes to the finish, so just encourage also our audience. It's great to chat, and like to encourage our audience to also make some questions if they feel like. So back to you.
Okay.
Please leave any comments in there for Marcella to hit, and yeah.
Okay. So to wrap up quickly, I was going to say that people are really good at finding ways to accomplish what they need to accomplish within their jobs using the tools they have. So you kind of need to let them do that. So in summary, back to our original question, an orchestrator can sometimes be used to take the place of ERP, but an orchestrator is best used to manage high-level end-to-end processes, something like a sales or order entry process. To project manage where required, to provide high-level audit logs and maintain KPIs, to automate the flow of information from system to system within the organization, dedicated system to dedicated system, or even system that provides supplementary support to the organization like chat or email. It can be used to supplement workflows where required, where you need to do something in between the various applications to keep the flow going, and to consolidate information to help people have at their disposal the data that they need to do what they need to do when they need to do it. And I think probably a good place to wrap there.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for that, Chris. And we have a couple of minutes till the top of the hour. No questions have come in as yet. That could either be coyness on the part of folk joining us today, or because of your incisive comments. I'll let everyone be the judge of which one that might be. But perhaps you could just spend a couple of minutes then on the soapbox for Clockworx, right? I mean, we understand as we close. Is there anything you'd like to say about the protect and extend approach that you've developed at Clockworx?
Yeah, sure. I'd say our real superpower, or at least our best capability over the years, is in integration. We do a lot of work for large IT clients. We do a lot of work for Cisco. We do a lot of work for EMC, Dell, New Relic, for example. A lot of systems where there's logging information that needs to be collected from a variety of applications and consolidated and reported on. Very often, we need to trigger processes within other applications. So we've been using a whole variety of APIs over the last 15 or 20 years to provide a massive number of different automations within a variety of systems. And so we are particularly good at figuring out how to get information in and out of other systems, and we're particularly good at at automating, particularly around APIs and moving information around through databases. And so we think that we can bring all of this knowledge and experience to bear on providing systems using Clockworx, the framework that we've developed, the tools that we've developed to help businesses solve some of these problems, to help automate and help accelerate what people are doing when delivering products.
Thank you, Chris. Makes a lot of sense. And as we close today, it sounds the kind of thing that I'm taking away from it as well, and I hope other folk are as well, is that orchestration is a lesser known solution. That it does actually challenge a lot of mainstream thoughts and thinking around in our industry. That it presents a pretty interesting way of protecting our existing investments and extending those. And so any organization really that is looking at, has process challenges, has data analytics issues, so struggling with supply chain, or even just wants to, is trying to find ways of doing what it's doing, but better, would be a pretty good fit for this kind of conversation. And from our point of view, and from Clockworx's point of view, it's about early engagement, right? I think there's something that we always really enjoy, and that's why we like to throw the cat in amongst the pigeons, as they say. And certainly, having been on a number of calls with you over the years, Chris, it's always interesting to see folk realise that there is a credible alternative to aggression, which so many of us have been scarred by in the past. So, is that fair in closing, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say finally, we love a challenge. We love a challenge. We enjoy having new problems to solve and welcome any opportunity to assist people in making things better.
Thank you for your time today, Chris. Marcella, back to you.
Yeah, just before we wrap up, we have a question from the audience. So the question is, the orchestration can also reduce the scope and danger for ERP.
Reduce the scope, absolutely. Absolutely. Orchestration can help take away from ERP some of the complexity. I mean, again, what you really want to be doing is using systems for what they're best at, right? Now, these days, everybody's trying to extend the footprint of their application by adding additional capabilities, and they're going off in all sorts of directions in their own ways. Organizations need systems that work their way, not the way that the application providers tell them that they should work. And so use even an ERP for what it's best at. Use the capabilities that it has for what for the value that it brings to the organization, for doing the things that it does best, and then use other systems for doing what they do best, and then glue it all together at a high level. Does that answer your question?
I believe so. Thank you, Chris. So with that note, we're going to close up our webinar. Thank you so much for joining today. We're going to follow up with the recording from this section. So any questions that you have further, please let us know. We're happy to answer them. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, William, for the talk today.
Great. Back to the sun.
Yes.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.